Well, you've been on the council before, but for those who may not know you, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Russ Pulley, and I've served on the council this is my 8th year. I'm about to roll off in a couple of weeks. And, in looking at what I wanted to do in the next chapter of my life when I left federal service, I wanted to do something service-oriented, and I didn't ever think I would be doing this. I looked at teaching, coaching, youth development was very important to me. I'd been involved in the neighborhood, and I've been involved pretty significantly over at Hillsborough High School. And through that, made some connections, and people tugged at me and said, why don't you consider doing this? I really gave it a little bit of thought, then a lot of thought. Once I wrapped my arms around the issues with passion and felt like I really could make a contribution, then I decided to run. Now I'm at the end of my second term, and we're term limited, so I looked at the at-large position, which I view as a completely different position from the district council position.
In what way?
Well, district council's constituent focused, and we spend a lot of our time responding to constituent needs, like trash didn't get picked up, stormwater problems in the district, we've got some zoning matters. District council members are significantly involved in that, and other things like that. So at-large positions are more broadly focused. You cover the entire city, and you're elected by the entire city, not a particular district. So it's been quite a journey to introduce myself to people, and most importantly, to learn what's important in other areas of the city besides my district. So I'm looking forward to that challenge if elected.
Do you think the previous district experience makes you better at perhaps lobbying if you have a certain issue or a piece of a bill or something that you want to get passed by everyone?
I think the experience of serving on the council helps in that arena because it is important. I think one of the most important things to do is establish relationships with people, relationships with your colleagues, so that you can engage in conversations about legislation, even though you may look at things from a different perspective. So that definitely helps. Being able to establish relationships with 3 separate mayor's offices, that definitely helps because you certainly need relationships there throughout that. And establishing relationships with other governmental bodies is also something that is of value, and understanding how the council works. So I think I'm sure that will help me. Does it make me better than somebody that's not been on the council? I don't know. You'd have to. There's a lot that goes into that answer.
You took some strong positions during your time on council, pushing for more funding for police. I know the license plate readers issue,
yes,
and against this redefining of family in the zoning code. Do you think you're going to have to change your policy positions at all when you're representing the county at large?
I don't know if you look at changing policy positions as maybe that's the way to phrase it. I do think that there is an element of representing the whole entire county where you have to look at things from a different perspective. I don't look at things from the perspective of representing District 25 in that position. I do think that there are guiding principles you enter the council with. So I hear from people who have different perspectives than those in my district now, and I do think those will help shape me in the future. I do think that I do have the perspective I have on public safety, and I want fact-based discussions. And when I enter into those discussions about countywide policy, like license plate readers and budget funding, my study and my perspective is not limited to the district. So unless I can be convinced otherwise, I'm still firmly convinced that removing money from our police department is not something that I think is a good thing.
Would you add money? Would you add officers, ideally?
Sure, I would, and I think working in conjunction with the police department is key to that. I think it's pretty clear they need more personnel, and I think there are people who feel very strongly in the other direction. We also have adapted the way we police in the 21st century as opposed to the way we did it before. Even in the last 6 years, I've seen that change. With Chief Drake, it's more community focused. We also have added to elements to policing that weren't there before. We have a Partners in Care program where we have mental health professionals going out with police. That's expanding. And we now are introducing mental health people to go to certain places alone. Those are all, very new, extremely new, and we're looking at those, looking at expanding them. How well are they working? What things do we need to do to change? So those are good things, and I also think that we still need more police officers in order to function properly.
I've heard talk of a new training facility.
Oh, yes.
I know you're a proponent of that. In Atlanta, they wanted to do something like that, and people really pushed back. Do you think that we're going to run into that also in Nashville, and how would you deal with funding that?
Well, I think it's important to have a fact-based conversation around that. We have a training facility that's significantly outdated, built 60 years ago. We're having classrooms being held in a gymnasium floor. We've got practical problems being where our police are trained in practical application with a simulator. They don't have a facility to actually do this. Like, for example, in my days in the FBI, we had a village that we could go to that was built specifically to simulate a mini city where we did our practical training. Now, I don't think anyone would be opposed to having exceptional training for those police officers who are put on the street to protect us. I don't see how anybody would be opposed to that or want us to be training the people who are out there protecting us in dilapidated facilities. We just went through that with the Juvenile Justice Center, where I went and took a tour of that, and it was in terrible condition and we needed a new one. And Judge Calloway and now the juvenile court clerk Lionel Matthews, they made appeals to us. We got that at the at the top of the capital spending list, and we're building that now. And I'm proud to say that we are, because it's long overdue considering the state of that facility. I think a combined police and fire training facility makes sense. It makes sense to the leadership in both of those organizations. But regardless of what your stance is on whether we should have more or less, I don't see how anybody should be opposed to having state-of-the-art training for our first responders.
What would be your top priority, you think, going in this next time?
Well, it's a good question. I hate to really just sort of say a top priority.
Right.
I could put a couple of things that jump off the page at me. I think you've just addressed public safety is very important. The Covenant shooting occurred in my district, and that hit home to really hard to people in my neighborhood, my district, and our city, as you well know. And that certainly has brought an element of safety as it relates to school safety and the safety of our children and gun violence and things of this nature to the forefront. There's a limit on what we as a city can do, but there are still things we can do that may enable us to address gun violence a little better than we do. But the safety of our children in schools is important. I also think that transit is a big deal now, because we're a growing city, and we have density, we've got development, yet we don't have a transit a plan, dedicated funding for infrastructure, which is way behind. I'm talking about decades behind here to address the needs of our city as it relates to transit. So that's a huge priority. I would think that, either of the two who are in the runoff for mayor, it's important to them. And as an at-large council member, I think it's very important that I get behind them and do what I can to push that, so that we have a referendum coming before the citizens to exercise dedicated funding at the state and the federal level and other areas where we could fund a robust transit plan, which this city sorely needs.